Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're getting into a really significant and honestly pretty complex story. The Tiny Rascal Gang, or TRG.
Yeah, TRG. There's a lot to unpack there.
Absolutely. You shared a whole lot of information with us, and the plan today is to really try and understand this gang. Where did it come from? How did it grow?
What's it been involved in?
Yeah.
And its reach is surprisingly wide, isn't it? Across the U.S., even popping up in Canada.
Exactly. We're trying to trace that story from the very beginning, back in 1981, right up to some things happening basically now in 2024.
And the sources we have, they give us a pretty rounded view. We've got historical background, details on criminal stuff, locations, specific incidents.
Reports, articles. Sounds like we've got the material to build a clear picture.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The beginning. 1981, Eastside, Long Beach, California. The sources seem pretty clear on that starting point.
That's the consensus, yes. Formed by Cambodian youth groups there.
And what was the main driver? Why did they form this group initially?
Well, the core reason, according to the information, was protection. Simple as that, almost.
Protection for whom?
Specifically for young Cambodians. Kids who had, or whose families had, escaped the Cambodian genocide. That historical backdrop is just... You can't understand the TRG without it.
Right. The Khmer Rouge regime, the killing fields, where millions died, and then the resettlement here in the U.S., starting around 79.
Exactly. So these refugees, they arrived carrying unimaginable trauma. The sources detail this, the PTSD, the depression, but also huge sociocultural hurdles.
Language barriers, finding your way in a totally new society.
And poverty, significant poverty in many of these resettled communities. It unfortunately created conditions where forming a group like TRG felt necessary for survival, for safety.
A way to find security in a place that probably felt pretty alienating, maybe even hostile.
Precisely. Finding some kind of security, some identity.
Okay, that sets the scene. But the gang didn't stay small or just focused on protection, did it? The numbers show pretty significant growth.
No, it definitely expanded. We see estimates like maybe 2,000 active members around 1999.
Yeah, and then by 2009, the estimate jumps quite a bit, 5,000 to 10,000 members and associates. That's a huge leap.
It is, and spread across, roughly 16 U.S. states plus Canada by then?
So what fueled that? How did it go from a local protection group to something so widespread?
Well, it seems that initial mission, the protection aspect, it sort of evolved. Or maybe got overshadowed.
How so?
The focus shifted more towards, frankly, criminal activities. The sources list things like drug trafficking becoming really central.
And other things too, right? Assaults, weapons.
Yes, arms trafficking, murder, theft, pretty much the whole spectrum of serious gang crime. And as members moved or maybe got deported and returned or just set up shop elsewhere, new chapters, they call them sets, popped up.
Spreading the network.
Great, establishing footholds in new cities, new states.
And there were internal shifts too. I remember the sources mentioning a major split.
Ah, yes. The Asian Boys, or ABZ. That's a really key point. A significant faction of TRG broke off and formed ABZ.
Which tells you...
Yeah.
What? That it wasn't all unified.
Exactly. It shows there were internal power struggles, disagreements, rivalries within the broader Cambodian gang scene. That split created one of their biggest, most enduring rivalries.
Interesting. And the reasons for joining also seem to have shifted, or at least varied depending on location, like in Washington state.
That's a good example. In Washington, TRG apparently became the largest Asian gang at one point, maybe around 200 members at its peak.
Wow.
But the reasons people joined there, according to the info, weren't solely about protection from, say, racist attacks anymore.
So what else was drawing people in?
It seems to be a mix. Things like feeling rejected by mainstream society, maybe not fitting in at school or work, and also just the straightforward allure of the gang lifestyle itself. The perceived excitement, the sense of belonging, the identity it offered.
So it's more nuanced than just, we need protection. It depends on the place, the time, the person.
Absolutely. It highlights the complex motivations behind why someone joins a gang. It's rarely just one single thing.
Okay, let's talk about the bigger picture. The web of relationships TRG has. The sources detail quite a few alliances and rivalries. It sounds complicated.
Oh, it is, very much so. On the alliance side, they've reportedly linked up with various Chinese organized crime groups, think 14K, Watching.
Who Hop 2 as well?
Yes, and also the Ghost Shadows, who are more based in New York City.
What do these alliances achieve for them?
Access, mostly. access to drug pipelines, weapons, maybe broader criminal networks. The sources also mention working with Vietnamese drug trafficking organizations, especially for importing things like MDMA or high-grade marijuana from places like Canada.
So strategic partnerships. But then there's the flip side, the rivalries.
And that's
Seems long.
It is. Intense, often violent rivalries. Top of the list, arguably, is the Asian Boys, that group that split off. That conflict has been bloody and persistent.
Across state lines, even.
Yeah, it pops up wherever both gangs have a presence. But beyond ABZ, they've clashed significantly with major players like the Bloods, the Crips.
Latin Kings,
Yeah.
Sureños.
Right, Sureños are a big one. And Trinitarios, too. Competition over turf, drug markets, respect, sometimes historical beefs. It's a dangerous landscape.
You mentioned the Sureños conflict. The sources pointed to something specific there involving the Mexican mafia.
Yes, that was a major escalation in the 90s. The Mexican mafia, La IME, reportedly put the TRG on their green light lists, meaning Sureño sets were essentially ordered to target TRG members on site, in prison, and on the streets. It became incredibly intense.
And did that lead to a really strange temporary truce?
It did, according to the sources. The rivalry between the West Side and East Side Longo gangs in Long Beach is legendary. It goes way back. But the Mexican mafia apparently ordered them to put that aside temporarily to focus all their energy on fighting the TRG.
Wow. That tells you how serious a threat the TRG was perceived as being.
Absolutely, to warrant that kind of intervention. Yeah.
Okay, moving beyond the gang politics, let's touch on the specific criminal activities. The sources give some grim examples that really drive home the impact.
Yeah, it's not just abstract categories like drug trafficking or assault. The information includes some truly disturbing incidents.
Like the Tustin case in 1994.
Exactly. 7 TRG members involved. Home invasion, robbery. They raped and strangled a mother in her home. Horrifically. Her young child was there.
And she only survived by pretending to be dead.
That's what the report indicates. Just chilling. It shows the brutality involved.
And there was another incident involving law enforcement.
Yes, in Sacramento, 2007. A 16-year-old TRG member shot and killed a police officer.
Just devastating.
It really is. These specific cases, and there are others mentioned, like a shooting in California that left a woman paralyzed. They put a human face on the violence. It's not just statistics.
No, absolutely not. Now let's talk geography again. The spread is extensive, not just California.
Definitely not. The TRG footprint is surprisingly wide. Take Lowell, Massachusetts, for example.
We're a large Cambodian-American community there.
Yes, and the sources link TRG presence there to multiple homicides and assaults over a couple of decades, roughly between 98 and 2021, according to local police reports.
And then somewhere like Philadelphia, it's a different dynamic again.
Yeah, Philly law enforcement apparently considers TRG one of the bigger Asian gangs in the city. They have a specific ongoing rivalry there with a group called the Red Scorpions. Lots of sporadic shootings reported.
Even smaller towns mentioned, like in North Carolina.
Right. The activity reported there seems different, maybe more focused on things like car thefts, gunfire incidents, rather than large-scale drug operations, perhaps.
In Alaska, Oregon, that seems far-flung.
It does, but the sources mention TRG presence in cities like Anchorage and Portland, involved in gun running, drug distribution.
And potentially working with local crews there.
Yeah, the information mentions connections with local groups like TM Drillas and 503 Boys in Portland, suggesting they integrate to some extent into the existing local criminal landscape.
So how does someone actually get into the gang? What's the initiation?
Well, the sources describe the classic jump in.
A beating, basically.
Yeah. Prospective members have to fight several current members or just endure a beating for a set amount of time. It's a test of toughness, commitment, standard procedure for many gangs, unfortunately.
Now, one detail in the sources that kind of jumped out at me was TRG members in the U.S. military. That feels unexpected.
It was a notable point, wasn't it? The information specifically mentioned TRG members being identified within the U.S. Army.
Any specific branches or just Army?
Primarily Army, it seems. The source from around 2011 stated no known members in the Air Force, Navy, or Marines at that time.
Do the sources say why or what the implications are?
They don't really delve into the why. One could guess, maybe seeing the military for structure, skills, maybe even access to weapons training. The implications are complex, obviously security concerns, gang influence within the ranks.
And besides the military, obviously, members end up incarcerated.
Oh, yes. The sources confirmed TRG presence in U.S. prisons, citing South Carolina as one example, which again shows their geographic spread. They're definitely part of the prison gang landscape, too.
Okay, let's shift to something more recent, the deportation issue. This seems huge.
It's a massive ongoing issue. The sources state that as of 2023, about 1,000 Cambodian-Americans had actually been deported back to Cambodia.
For various crimes, often committed years ago.
Exactly. Many had lived in the U.S. nearly their whole lives, and thousands more were potentially facing deportation.
But there was a twist recently, in 2024.
Yeah, a pretty significant one. The Cambodian government reportedly refused entry for a flight carrying about 1,000 deportees, essentially pushed back against the U.S. policy.
Wow, diplomatic fallout there, I imagine.
Definitely raises questions. And it links back to the gang, too. What happens to former or current TRG members who are deported?
Do they start forming sets in Cambodia? Does the gang take root there?
That's the big unknown. The sources specifically mention it's really unclear if that's happening, partly because of press censorship in Cambodia. It's hard to get reliable information on the ground.
So we might be exporting the problem, but we don't even know what effect it's having over there.
It's a major concern. What are the unintended consequences of these deportation policies, both for the individuals and for Cambodia itself?
And one final point on membership, while it started Cambodian-American, it hasn't stayed exclusively that way, has it?
No, that's important. The TRG, especially in certain regions like the West Coast, the Southwest, even New England, has recruited members from other ethnic backgrounds, too.
So the lines blur over time.
Yeah, it shows how gang identity can evolve. It's not always strictly tied to the original ethnic group. Local demographics, social dynamics, they all play a part.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. As we wrap up this deep dive on the Tiny Rascal Gang, what are the main things that stick with you from all this information?
I think what really stands out is just how layered this story is. You have the deep, deep roots in the trauma of genocide and the struggles of refugees.
That initial need for protection.
Exactly. But then you see this evolution, this mutation almost, into a sprawling criminal network that's active across the country.
With complex alliances, brutal rivalries.
Right. And the reasons people get pulled in seem to change, too, depending on where you look. It's not just one simple narrative. It's moved well beyond just seeking safety.
So thinking about everything we've looked at, the history, the socioeconomic stuff, the immigration policies, the violence, the expansion, what's the bigger takeaway or question it leaves us with?
For me, it really underscores the immense, long-lasting challenges that refugee communities can face and how those struggles can intersect with the rise of gang culture. It's not simple cause and effect, but the links are there.
And the current situation with deportations adds another really complicated layer.
It absolutely does. The uncertainty about what's happening in Cambodia following deportations, the questions about whether these policies actually solve anything or just shift the problem, it leaves you wondering about the real long-term impacts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely makes you think beyond the headlines. Hopefully, this discussion has given everyone listening a deeper, more nuanced perspective on a really complex subject.
That's the goal. A
Yeah.
lot to consider.